Because one of the risks is the risk of coup d'etat, to say there is a potential risk of a coup d'etat. We have identified it and we've put measures to mitigate against it. So that's why we say to South Africans, there has not been anyone attempting to do a coup in South Africa. In the last few days or in the last few weeks, there has not been anyone attempting to do a coup in South Africa. We can say that not that they are not people planning. They are, but we're continuously monitoring them and making sure that we deal with them.
There is a high alert in South Africa because it has just been told, in no uncertain terms, that the threat of a coup is real. Not whispered in secret intelligence memos, not hidden in coded leaks, said openly, on the record, by a minister standing before the public and media. State Security Minister Khumbudzo Ntshavheni declared that while no coup attempt has unfolded in recent weeks, the risk is identified, monitored, and embedded in South Africa's official national security strategy. Think about that for a second. A sitting government warning its own citizens that a coup d'etat is on the list of clear and present dangers. So, what does it really mean when a minister goes public and openly announces that various coups have already been dealt with in South Africa? The words carry more than caution. They carry the weight of a system rattling under pressure. Now imagine this unfolding in the context of generals calling their army a Mickey Mouse operation, prosecutors admitting infiltration at the heart of justice, and police chiefs accusing cabinet ministers of colluding with criminals. These are not the whispers of conspiracy theories. These are direct public statements from the insiders entrusted to guard the state. So, a question arises. Is South Africa headed for a coup? In this video, let's find out. Everything began with a funeral meant to mourn the life of a soldier who had died in the Democratic Republic of Congo. But what unfolded became a turning point in South Africa's security discourse. General Zola Dabula Mafana, standing in full military uniform, used the solemn occasion not to recite comforting words or praise the fallen, but to deliver a blistering critique of his own institution. Calling the South African National Defence Force, SANDF, a Mickey Mouse operation, Mafana did more than bruise egos. He broke the code of silence that binds soldiers to civilian authority. For a general to openly castigate the SANDF, and by extension the politicians who underfund and undermine it, was a direct challenge to the civilian-military compact. It signaled discontent not just within the lower ranks, where grumblings are common, but within the highest echelons of command. Analysts recognize this as the first public rupture in the chain of command, a symbolic breach that could embolden others. Parliament reacted with outrage, promising accountability hearings, but follow-up never came. The silence that followed was louder than any reprimand. It showed the political class was either unwilling or unable to discipline a general for public insubordination. That failure became the first crack in the wall of South Africa's democratic stability, a reminder that when officers lose faith in political leadership, coups begin not with tanks, but with words. Interestingly, the warning signs did not remain confined to the military. Just weeks later, Shamila Batohi, head of the National Prosecuting Authority, NPA, stood before a public audience and uttered words that chilled the room. With a calm but visibly strained voice, she admitted that the very institution she led had been infiltrated by people who do not respect the rule of law. This was not a technical complaint about budget shortages or case backlogs. It was an extraordinary confession that networks inside the NPA were actively sabotaging justice. She hinted at shadow actors pursuing agendas alien to the Constitution, and admitted that these realities kept her awake at night. Her openness revealed more than personal anxiety. It exposed institutional fragility. For the public, this was frightening enough. If the state's top prosecutor admitted that her institution was compromised, how could citizens trust that justice would be delivered? Once the justice system fractures, it erodes the very legitimacy of civilian governance. When generals sense that the courts cannot hold the powerful accountable, it feeds the narrative that only the military can restore order. The timing of Batohi's admission, coming so soon after Mafana's critique of the SANDF, suggested that cracks were not isolated. They were systemic, spreading across institutions meant to uphold the republic. By July, the unraveling became impossible to ignore. KwaZulu-Natal's police commissioner, Nalala Mkhwanazi, detonated a political earthquake. In front of cameras, without hesitation, he accused Police Minister Senzo Machunu and his deputy of colluding with criminal syndicates. He went further, alleging that they had shut down investigations into political murders and deliberately blocked detectives from probing high-level corruption. This was no leak or anonymous whistleblower account. It was a senior police official openly accusing members of the cabinet of protecting killers and cartels. The allegations pointed not to incompetence, but to infiltration at the highest levels of power. The fallout was immediate. President Cyril Ramaphosa suspended Machunu and announced a judicial commission of inquiry to investigate the claims. Civil society groups praised Mkhwanazi as a truth-teller, willing to risk his career. Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black Africa. Let's continue now. Seasoned analysts saw something even more unsettling: a police chief bypassing internal channels and appealing directly to the public. In fragile democracies, this is how coups germinate, when security officials decide the system cannot reform itself and instead seek legitimacy from the streets. Mkhwanazi's defiance tied together the threads woven by Mafana and Batohi. The military said the force was collapsing. The prosecutor said justice was infiltrated. Now the police said politicians were in bed with criminals. Together, these alarms suggested a state where the very institutions tasked with defending order were themselves breaking ranks. As if the air were not already thick with unease, another breach rattled Pretoria. General Rudzani Mafwanya, head of the SANDF, boarded a plane to Iran without informing the president. In civilian politics, a rogue trip might be brushed off as poor coordination. In military politics, it is a thunderclap. Top generals cannot travel abroad without presidential approval. Such visits carry implications of defense deals, intelligence sharing, or alliances that could alter the balance of power. By ignoring the chain of command, Mafwanya effectively signaled that he no longer regarded the presidency as the supreme authority over the military. For scholars of African coups, the moment was chillingly familiar. In Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, coups were preceded by precisely such gestures: generals defying civilian oversight, building external relationships, and preparing the narrative of a military better suited to rescue the nation. South Africa was not yet Mali or Burkina Faso, but the echoes were unmistakable. Just as the dust from Mafwanya's defiance settled, Admiral Moshe Labzi, head of the Navy, added another layer of crisis. Speaking bluntly, he accused South Africa's treasury of crippling the military by withholding funds essential for naval patrols, border protection, and readiness. His words cut deeper than budget grievances. By framing the treasury as a super department, deliberately choking defense, he implied sabotage from within the civilian machinery itself. This is the logic that feeds coup rhetoric: soldiers portraying themselves as betrayed by politicians who weaken national defense. In West Africa, underfunding and humiliation of the military were constant preludes to coups. Labzi's remarks suggested the same narrative was gaining ground in South Africa, that the armed forces were being starved not by accident, but by design. The accusation tied the institutional crisis to a larger political economy. If the treasury was seen as undermining security, then even fiscal policy became part of the coup conversation. Soldiers were no longer merely angry. They believed they were being targeted. The final blow came not from a general or prosecutor, but from the government itself. On July 16th, Minister Khumbudzo Ntshavheni announced during her budget presentation that a coup d'etat was formally recognized as a risk in South Africa's national security strategy for 2024 to 2028. She assured the public that intelligence agencies were monitoring and that no recent attempts had occurred. But the language was stark. Coups were no longer hypothetical. They were on the list of active national threats. her timing was explosive. The announcement came just as President Ramaphosa suspended his police minister over corruption allegations. It confirmed what many feared, that the executive itself was entangled in the same crises tearing at the fabric of the state. By placing coup risk in official documents, the government effectively admitted that South Africa had entered dangerous terrain. What had begun in February as a general's insult at a funeral had, by July, evolved into a national debate about the survival of democracy itself. So, what does this mean for South Africa? Well, the sequence of events mirrored an all-too-familiar pattern in African states that fell to coups. First, generals speak out. Then, prosecutors warn of infiltration. Next, police expose political rot. Civilian authority is undermined. Finally, a corrective military intervention is framed as the only solution. South Africa has not yet reached the final stage. The rand even strengthened recently, buoyed by mining output figures. The economy, while battered, still functions. But beneath these indicators lie deep vulnerabilities: Eskom's collapsing grid, entrenched corruption, and the erosion of trust in state institutions. Coups rarely arrive suddenly. They build in silence, through repeated breaches of protocol and public legitimacy, until one tipping point ignites the storm. In South Africa, those breaches are now visible, multiplying in public and resonating across institutions. The longer they remain unaddressed, the more likely escalation becomes. What do you think? If generals, prosecutors, and police chiefs are all raising alarms in public, can South Africa still pretend these are just isolated outbursts? When ministers themselves admit a coup is now part of the national security strategy, is that a warning sign or the first step in normalizing the unthinkable? And most importantly, will South Africa's leaders act before the storm breaks? Or will they wait until tanks are on the streets and it is already too late? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We bring videos on Black Africa, its history, rich arts and culture, and things the world should know about. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.